Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I want to have some fun and delve into some of my Star Trek Discovery Season 2 theories. Mostly because it was something that a lot of you out there requested, and because, I mean, who doesn't like to have fun making theories? It's scientific, and that's what Star Trek's all about, science. So I'm going to go over some of my thoughts and theories and some of the themes that are going on in Star Trek Discovery Season 2, some of the major ones that I haven't really seen discussed elsewhere on YouTube and the internet. And then I also want to kind of give my thoughts on who is the Red Angel, as well as briefly discuss topics like this big issue of what timeline everything's in, whether it's Prime, whether it's Kelvin, whether it's some other canon timeline that exists outside of both Prime and Kelvin and all that jazz. And sort of throw my hat in the ring on that a little bit, just touching on it. I don't want to delve too deep into it because that's a whole minefield, blade mines, as it were. And then I wanted to end the video on who I think most likely is the Red Angel, and then also my crazy balls to the wall theory on who I think would be a lot of fun to be the Red Angel, and what I would really love to have be the Red Angel, but I don't think actually is the Red Angel. It's never gonna happen, but I think would be absolutely cool if that actually worked out. So with that as a tease to watch the entire video, let's jump into some of my theories. But before we dive into that, I just want to say please subscribe to my channel. I do weekly Star Trek Discovery reviews as well as analysis of Star Trek and other geek culture topics like Star Wars, Doctor Who, and all the things under the sun, as well as analyzing them through an LGBTQ lens from time to time. And I release new videos every single Friday. And then also on top of that, I just started a Patreon page. The link is down below. And the reason I started that page is because I've been seeing a lot more people come to my page specifically for my Star Trek Discovery reviews and thoughts. And I really want to make this channel a much more higher end experience. You know, I try to do these videos that require a lot of time and editing, but a lot of some of my equipment isn't exactly up to snuff. I mean, as many of you notice, I'm still using like this cheap, like really cheap mic. And I would just generally like to improve the quality of my videos for you guys and to just make some more work that I am really proud of. I just want to take it up to that next level. You know, any little bit helps, and I would just super appreciate anyone out there who is willing and able to give some money to help just make this channel better. Alright, so the first topic that I wanted to just briefly touch on was the Culber-Stamets subplot. This one actually, for me personally, is one of the ones that I find to be the most directly relating to me, not just because they're an LGBTQ couple and I'm also part of the LGBTQ community, but because it's dealing a lot with issues of PTSD, trauma, disassociation, and a lot of issues like that that are very common within the LGBT community and are issues that have affected people that I really care about, and, you know, myself from time to time as well. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to that storyline because I am hesitant to try and make theories on where that's going to go, because I think there's a lot of great ways they can go, but also a lot of ways that they might fail in that storyline and actually accurately depicting how someone works through PTSD, because PTSD and things like that really never completely goes away. And I think if the writers stick to that sort of idea, I think that would be a very strong way to showcase that story and have Stamets really learn that he has to understand that this is now part of who Culber is now, and that this is something that Culber's just gonna have to, you know, deal with for the rest of his life. And not saying it's all going to be doom and gloom and sad and terrible, but that this is something that they're going to have to work through and carry forward and learn to live with. Part of that can actually be a really beautiful thing, in the sense that, like, Stamets can really be the person who helps Culber work through a lot of these ideas. And I do think that this season is going to end those two, if not completely back together, at least on the road to getting back together. I really hope that that's the case, and I really don't see them doing anything else. But I do hope that it's not too easy, nor do I wish that it's too hard. I want to see some level of hope there, but I don't want it to be just Stamets does some big romantic gesture and Culber's just back in his arms. I don't have any specific theories on that, but I really just wanted to touch on that storyline in particular because it just means a lot to me, and I'm just cautiously optimistic on how it's going to be handled because of how things happened in season 1 and how I wasn't particularly happy with how they handled the LGBTQ storyline there with the bury your gays trope. So moving on, the next storyline that I find particularly fascinating and I want to kind of touch upon is the Section 31 plot, basically the sort of triangle between Burnham, Leland and Georgiou. So to just briefly recap, we have Captain Leland, who is the head of the Section 31 ship, and then we have sort of Georgiou very clearly vying for power. Now, initially what I thought that storyline was going to go down was Georgiou is basically clearly slowly turning the crew against Leland and the admirals and the heads of Section 31. And I thought that she was eventually just going to have a coup, basically do something really terrible to cause Leland to be questioned in command, like he's going to make some terrible, questionable decision, and she's like, I'll take over, and I have everyone's backing on the ship to take over from you. But what intrigues me now is that I don't know if that storyline is going to completely work. Now, I feel like there's going to be some element of that, but the biggest sort of problem with that now is all the admirals of Section 31 were killed in the last episode. We went on the Section 31 base, and all the admirals were dead and literally, like, smashed to pieces, which was a bit gruesome. What I do find interesting, and what I think they might be going for with that storyline, is Burnham clearly is going to have to learn at some point, because they have that sort of Chekhov's gun in the story, that Leland caused somehow Burnham's parents to die. I find that interesting because they've made a point this season, especially last episode, of how Burnham carries all this weight of feeling this guilt on her character's shoulders. Like, she feels the guilt of getting her parents killed. Like, she's the one that asked to stay to watch the supernova, and then that's when the Klingons came and her parents died. I wonder at how Leland ties into that plot. There is a minor theory in my head that maybe the Red Angel appeared to Leland, and Leland had to do something that led the Klingons to arriving there. And so it's the Red Angel's fault for the Klingons coming there vis-a-vis Leland. And I'll sort of tie into where I think the Red Angel is sort of manipulating events in that sense in a little bit. But I think that would be sort of an interesting question for Burnham, because what I think is going to happen is Leland is going to have to reveal to Burnham that he caused her parents to die, and Burnham's going to be placed in a situation where she might have to let Leland die. Like, she may straight up kill Leland, or just have a situation where Leland gets killed and Burnham's responsible for it. And the reason I say this is for a few reasons. One, Georgiou has constantly said, like, I know you better than you do. Now, we kind of get the hint that she knows that because she knew Burnham from the other universe and knows that other Burnham, Mirror Burnham, could do some really dark stuff. But I really think what they're setting up is that Georgiou knows that she can manipulate Burnham to do her dirty work for her and get rid of Leland so that she can take his place. And I think that would be a sort of interesting setup. And then also, I feel it would be interesting for Burnham because, again, she carries all this guilt with her and, like, feeling like she's responsible for everything. And earlier in last episode, it's very important to note that she didn't kill Ariam when she was supposed to. So it would be interesting is if there's a similar situation where she has to let someone die, particularly Leland, and she does cause Leland to die, and she's like, well, why did I make that decision? And then she starts feeling guilty because she's like, maybe I let him die because I hated him for killing my parents. And then she's going to feel all the guilt of that. I think that would sort of be an interesting route to take her character down, just giving her more and more guilt. I'm sorry, Burnham. But I think that would sort of be an interesting conundrum to set her up with, based on some character flaws that they're really trying to explore with her character in recent episodes. So that's where I think that Section 31 plot's going to go. I mean, clearly Georgiou is going to be the one that takes over Section 31 by either the end of the season or maybe next season, but at the very least by whenever the Section 31 show that we're going to get comes out, which we've heard rumors that it's going to come out after Season 3. So at some point, that's going to have to pay off. Maybe it doesn't happen this season, but I think there's a lot of pieces moving into place where that might actually make sense that it happens this season, and sort of Georgiou takes over the Section 31 ship. And then we get pieces of her throughout Season 3, and then that sort of sets off on the Section 31 storyline that comes out. So the next thing that I want to touch on is the theme of AI in this season of Discovery. We recently learned in the last episode that, you know, most likely, or at least we believe, that the AI control Section 31 and Starfleet's general system analysis AI is what's going to eventually evolve to cause all the destruction of all sentient life in the galaxy. I find that to be a particularly interesting storyline for Discovery to be going down for a couple reasons. This idea of killer AI, like AI is out to get us and going to kill all of us, has slowly been evolving to become a more sympathetic portrayal of AI just in popular culture. I mean, we went from things like Terminator and The Matrix, which is basically AI. We have Skynet, which is an AI system, and we're moving more into an era of looking at AI through the lens of like Westworld, where there's still like the kill all humans part of it, but we have a much more sympathetic feeling towards AI. So I feel like it would be somewhat sad if Discovery only goes down this like killer AI route, and that we're going to, just have an AI that's going to rampantly kill everyone because AI bad. And I don't think that that's what they're setting up. The reason I think that is because we already saw a version of a good AI in the short trek Calypso with Zora. She was clearly an AI who we were meant to sympathize with and feel like, yes, she is just as human, or at least getting there, as anyone else. When I say human, I mean like has emotions, is sort of a sentient being. And I also find the idea that they constantly say they're going to destroy all sentient life in the galaxy and not organic. Maybe they've kind of mixed up the two and they've said organic sometimes and sentient the other. But I find it interesting that they choose to say sentient life, because if Control becomes sentient and wants to kill everything else, well, then it's not killing all sentient life in the galaxy. And maybe that's the sort of setup, because I think a lot of what thematically is going on is this idea of like what makes something human, what makes something feel like it is a real living being. I mean, we have Spock kind of dealing with that throughout his sort of appearance on the show so far, as like, oh, I'm dealing with logic and my human emotions, and I don't feel like a full Vulcan or full human. I mean, that's sort of been his character from the beginning, but it's more pushed out in the recent episodes. He's definitely full on at extremes on both ends, sort of oscillating between the two. We have a lot of other characters who are really kind of dealing with like, who am I and my identity and what makes me me? What makes me my species? I mean, Saru kind of had the same sort of thing, learning more about who he is through his Bahari. So I find it interesting to have this question of like, what is human? And that ties into my last sort of thought with who is the Red Angel? And this is where I'm kind of going to get into my sort of bigger thoughts on who is the Red Angel here. Because what do we know about the Red Angel? Well, we know a couple things. The few things that we do know for sure, that the Red Angel is trying to fix the timeline. When we talk about timelines here on Star Trek, it's sort of a sore spot for a lot of Trekkies here on the YouTube space in particular. But the way I sort of see the timeline, and there's a wonderful YouTuber out there named Kowalski, who is another Star Trek themed YouTuber, who really kind of succinctly put it out there that while Discovery is taking place in canon, I think generally all of us have to agree with that at this point. I know there was some theory out there that there's like an alternate weird timeline things going on, and that there's some weird CBS licenses, whatever, capitalism, people trying to make money, whatever. Who cares, honestly, in my book, in terms of discussing theories anyways. Settle upon the idea that Discovery is canon. It's part of canon. It is Star Trek. And we've seen that sort of proved because we've seen the previously on Star Trek where they had, scenes from the cage. So clearly the original series is in some form or another still in continuity with Discovery. Now, here's where things get kind of confusing and interesting, is we have mention of a different timeline where things end and all sentient life in the galaxy gets wiped out, and the Red Angel is someone who's coming back in time to try and change that outcome. So a lot of people have postulated, and like I said, Kowalski sort of put this out there, that what if the original series, TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, all sort of took place in that timeline that eventually leads to the destruction of all sentient life in the galaxy. And when the Red Angel went back in time and saved Burnham's life when she was a child, vis-a-vis Spock, that led to a offshoot of the timeline, and that's sort of where Discovery is. And then from there, bits and pieces of both universes kind of intermingle. Like, obviously, the cage kind of happened very similarly in both universes. Or, this is all BS and it's all just one timeline, it's all in continuity with everything else, and that the end point of, the only thing that really is going to be affected at the end, whether or not, like, everything gets killed at the end of the timeline or not. But I generally think that this is probably what they're going for, based on a couple of my thoughts and theories. We know two basic things about the Red Angel. One, that it is human, quote unquote. Spock said that he mind melded with it and that he felt that it was human. And also in that episode, he said she. He referred to the angel as a she. And that was sort of like a casually tossed off thing that no one really mentioned, but was in there. So I don't know what that exactly means, and I'm going to mildly ignore it until it helps my theories. But we do know that the Red Angel is quote-unquote human. So who is the Red Angel? Clearly, what I am assuming going to happen, we have this idea of Project Daedalus. Now, Daedalus was the Greek god who built the wings for Icarus, and then Icarus flew too close to the sun and eventually, fell and died famously. So clearly, they're making a reference to the fact that Project Daedalus is most likely the Red Angel with the wings. They're going to find Project Daedalus most likely in the next episode, and that's going to lead to figuring out who the Red Angel is. The next episode is literally called The Red Angel. Now, here is my theory for what's going to happen. A lot of people have put out there that it's most likely Burnham, and that is probably true. That would be disappointing to a lot of people, especially me. Specifically for some people, they have a problem with Burnham being the Red Angel because it ties in again to this sort of Mary Sue idea that Burnham is this Mary Sue who can do everything and get everything done, and she's so important to the galaxy that she needs to always be tying into some sort of mythological great grand thing. Now, I haven't really ever bought into Michael Burnham being a Mary Sue as of yet. There's a great video essay by Trexpertise, I'll link to that video below, where they kind of dived into and analyzing the idea of a Mary Sue and whether or not Burnham fits into that, and I generally agree with that. That being said, if Burnham turns out to be the Red Angel, then maybe I might give it a little bit more credence, because that's 2 times where Burnham basically changes the universe. We had the Klingon War, was basically directly her fault, or at least she feels that way, or at least everyone feels that way. And then she's the Red Angel that's going to save all sentient life in the galaxy. Now, we could also make the argument that because the Red Angel saved her, that led to the Klingon War and created the alternate timeline that has Discovery in it. We'll put that aside for now, but it would still kind of frame this idea of Burnham's super, super important, regardless of whether she existed in continuity before this or not, vis-a-vis the Red Angel. I know this is getting very confusing, and I'm sorry. But yeah, so I would find that part of it to be a bit disappointing, and also it's just too obvious. Burnham, the main character of the show is the Red Angel. It was yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. And also, we discover who the Red Angel is next episode. Most likely, I'm assuming, because again, it's called the Red Angel. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we won't find out until the finale or closer to the finale, but we're getting there. And so it's okay, so would the rest of the season just be Michael Burnham zipping around in the Red Angel suit doing stuff? Because that would be kind of boring for the last few episodes, and I don't really think that's what they were going to do. My theory is that Michael Burnham will get the suit, and that's how next episode's going to end. And everyone's going to be oh, she's the Red Angel, god damn it, fuck. But what's really going to happen is that's going to be a misdirection, a red herring, if you will, and that the Red Angel is actually going to turn out to be someone else that Burnham's going to give the suit to at some point. So it'll appear that she's the Red Angel, but it's not actually going to be the Red Angel. Also, the problem with Burnham being the Red Angel, I should mention, is if there was a timeline where Burnham died, and the Red Angel goes back in time, and it is Michael Burnham, how could Michael Burnham have existed in a timeline where she died and then gone back and saved herself? That would be a paradox on many, 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 many levels. It's not saying it couldn't happen, but would be super confusing and really weird and difficult to explain on this show. So that's another reason why I don't think that Michael Burnham is the Red Angel. So if the Red Angel isn't Burnham, and we know that the Red Angel is human, well, who could it be then? There are 2 basic candidates that I would put the most stock in, and one that I think is sort of crazy out there that no one's ever going to buy, but I kind of really want it to happen. The first is that the Red Angel is Spock himself, that he went back in time and picked himself. Now, the reason I think that this is the case is because Spock has been dealing with this concept of am I human or am I Vulcan? And which side of myself am I really? And which do I really feel like I'm good enough to be either? So when he mind melds with the Red Angel and he senses that it's human, wouldn't that just be thematically interesting that, he feels like he's not good enough as a human, but that some point in the future where he becomes a Red Angel, he feels human. And that when he mind melds with himself, he's weirdly confirming that he is fully human. That is a completely and totally valid part of his identity. I think that would just be such a cool concept that he validates himself in a weird way. And I think that would just be a nice resolution to his character arc. The reason I don't necessarily think that this is Spock is because, again, we get that she pronoun that Spock uses in this. And as much as I sort of love the idea of a transgender Spock, I'm all down for that, I don't really think that that's the angle that the showrunners are going for. As disappointing as that is for me personally. So this leaves one of the candidate that I think is most likely. Now, we know before her death, Ariam downloaded all of her memories into the Discovery ship. And we know that she was part human. And then through the short trek Calypso, we know that Zora exists and is an AI and wants to have true feelings and wants to be a human. So what if at some point Discovery gets abandoned and left for 1,000 years through some sort of plot thing that's happening? Discovery uses Ariam's memories to become sentient the same way Control was trying to use the information from the red sphere to become sentient itself. And Zora basically becomes a sentient computer AI, but still has this question of, is it human enough? And again, that's a theme running throughout this whole season. And so wouldn't it be fascinating to sort of have this counterpoint with AI where there's like one who's like, I want to destroy everything, and Zora who is like, I want to be more human. And that sort of ties into just Star Trek themes in general of idea of like, am I human or am I not? Am I like valid? Am I not? These two sides of myself. What if Zora becomes the Red Angel and is trying to save the timeline because that's her mission and that's what she's supposed to do, but is also trying to make herself feel like she is actually human. So that when Spock connects with and mind melds with the Red Angel and senses that it's human, that validates Zora as a human. And that would just sort of validate this really interesting idea of being sympathetic towards AI. And are AI actually human after all? And Spock himself is the one that validates, yes, AI is human. And so I really kind of like that idea. And I really think that that's more than likely what's going to happen. That Burnham will be a fake out. Everyone's going to think that Burnham's the Red Angel and they're going to play that up. But then there's going to be a switcheroo and it's actually going to be Zora who is the Red Angel and is actually finding herself made human. And maybe even would become a regular part of the crew of Discovery moving into season 3. Or they could pull like what they did on the TV show Angel, where basically it's like the actress who plays Ariam comes back, but she's playing Zora. And it's like, I'm not actually Ariam, I'm a different character, I'm Zora now, but I'm still Ariam. That might be what they go for. My last crazy out there theory that I've sort of been like teasing this whole episode is, what if the Red Angel is in fact Sybok, Spock's long lost brother who no one seems to be mentioning on Discovery? It would make perfect sense for Sybok to be the Red Angel. It's never gonna happen, but just hear me out on this. It always bugs me, the fact that Sybok is never brought up. Now, people always say, like, Spock doesn't mention, you know, his other family members. That's why we never heard of Burnham. That's why we never heard of Sybok until Star Trek V. But it just weirds me out that, like, in scenes where Sarek and Amanda are talking about Burnham and Spock, Sarek has that beautiful line that I really loved, where Sarek says, I don't want to lose both my children in one day. And seeming to make the reference that he only has 2 children. And we know that that's inaccurate. We know that there's Spock, and there's Burnham, and there's Sybok. They have to exist in some way, shape, or form. And it would irk me that, like, I know a lot of people give crap to Discovery writers for, you know, missing parts of canon. And it's like, you know what? Some random reference on TOS that they somehow got wrong here and there, I don't really care that much about. I mean, hell, there's an episode of TOS where they say Scotty hates women and like brutalizes women. Like, I can forget that part, you know, that can go away. I'm fine with forgetting that part of canon. But that being said, Star Trek V was a movie. It was like a big movie. It was not a good movie in particular, but I know I have a little bit of a weak spot for it. It's kind of one of those so bad it's good kind of things. But it was a big movie that like people went to theaters to see. And that generally kind of puts like a higher impetus on it being more likely to be referenced. And so the fact that they like have a character who is Spock's sibling in this show and then not mention the other random Spock sibling just feels weird to me that they would just miss that. Maybe it is an oversight, or maybe they'll explain it at some point down the road as just, you know, Spock doesn't like to mention Sybok and neither does Sarek, and Amanda's like, fuck that child, I only care about these 2. It would make sense that Sybok is the one in the Red Angel suit because this whole season's about faith and finding faith in yourself and God and religion and all these things, and who in Star Trek was someone who was always about religion and finding God? That's right, Sybok. He was a character who was all about faith. That was like his whole thing in that movie. So what if Sybok is the one in the Red Angel suit, went back in time and saved Burnham, and that sort of led Sybok to being erased from the timeline. And Sybok's doing that because he knows that he has to protect all sentient life in the galaxy, but also feels like, you know, his sacrifice is that he erases himself from the timeline. And that would sort of parallel Michael Burnham with feeling like she carries all this burden on herself, well, Sybok's doing the same thing and sort of releasing his burden at this point and being like, I did what I had to do and I'm erasing myself from the timeline in order to do what's right. So yeah, that's sort of like my random theory. I don't necessarily know if that's really ever going to make sense, because that would also mean that they would have to recast Sybok, and they did that secretly and all this jazz. And it would also be like super, super confusing to explain to anyone who like doesn't know Star Trek V. Oh, hi, there's another random sibling that we're bringing into this storyline now. Yeah, I don't really think it would happen, but it would be an interesting sort of thing to bring in, and sort of a cool treat for Trekkies, but would also make thematic sense with what's going on and wouldn't feel like it's being fan service, but it would actually feel thematically relevant. So that's my crazy out there theory that the Red Angel's Sybok, but if I had to put money down, I would put money down that it's Zora. And then, you know, if I'm putting like slightly longer odds, I would say Burnham, and then kind of an outlier but still possible, Spock himself. And then anyone else out there, like maybe, but I doubt it. That's all of my theories for Star Trek Discovery Season 2. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you like this video, give my channel a subscribe. I have a lot of really awesome content out there for you that's coming up, and I know you'll like it. And if you want to help make my content even better, please consider giving to my Patreon page. Every little bit helps. Even if you can only give $1 a month, that would honestly just really help getting this whole production up a notch. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, live long and prosper.